Where did you grow up, and like how would you kind of describe that environment?
So I grew up in Maryland, the suburbs of Maryland, and it was a predominantly white high school. And like socioeconomically, we were all pretty financially well off. But I also spent a lot of time at Chinese school on Sundays, so I was pretty in tune with like my Chinese background.
Do you mind talking a little bit about how it has affected your view of like romantic relationships and like how you navigate the dating world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my parents were pretty much those parents who were like, you can't date while you're in high school. And I think it was really easy for me to accept that because I wasn't super interested in dating anyone from my high school at the time. But, like having them say that more solidified, I guess, my want. So sometimes I would wonder if it's actually something I wanted versus if it was something that was imposed on them that I kind of internalized and then convinced myself that is what I wanted. So yeah, and then I think in terms of marriage and romantic relationships, it wasn't expressed to me as much in high school because they're like no dating. But then as soon as I started college, they're like, oh, like start looking for a boyfriend, start looking for a future husband. Like you go to such an amazing school, like it's so easy to find someone. Like you're gonna find someone great. I think the outlook on that, and like talking to some of the people I'm really close with, who are also like similar for me, like Asian backgrounds and everything, like it just seems like relationships were viewed as very practical sort of stage in your life, and that you like met someone who like was nice, had a stable life, grew up in a similar background as you, and like checked off all of these boxes, and there was never really emphasis on love and the more romanticized version of how you view relationships, which I kind of wish I had gotten because like relationships are hard regardless if they're romantic or platonic. And I think just focusing on the simple factors of does he check this box of like making X amount or like growing up from this background that was like really similar to you, things like that seemed really unproductive for someone who, like me, was young and wanted to just meet people and kind of understand who I am.
You briefly mentioned going on dating apps before. Do you mind talking a little bit more about your experience with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even know where to begin. I think I got on dating apps because I was just bored and wanted to like meet people. I think for a while I questioned if people liked me because I was Asian and they thought I was attractive because I was Asian, or if it was because like of who I am. So like that whole like fetishizing for Asians. So I think to an extent that made me uncomfortable. And while I was doing dating apps with my friends, we were just like, oh, if we were white, like we would have so many more matches or things like that. So it's like both dehumanizing to an extent to like think people don't find you attractive because you're Asian, but on the other side, it feels really uncomfortable thinking that people like maybe wondering if people swiped right because you were Asian.
How common do you feel these racial preferences are, or do you feel like there are racial preferences in your community?
I was really good friends with like South Indians, South Asian. Okay, yeah, at my high school, and we were just joking like, why don't we just marry a white man so we can like feed into white supremacy and like never be like kind of stepped on as a minority. And I think from like where I come from, there is like a pretty strict standard of like adhering to your social racial class and like marrying in and dating into that.
Can you think of like any other factors that have influenced how you navigate relationships and like kind of what you expect from these relationships?
Okay, so during pandemic, I downloaded TikTok and somehow came upon relationship TikTok, and it was just like, oh, like my boyfriend like bought me flowers, like would do all this stuff, and I'd be like, oh, like that's so cute. And I think for some time I was relying on these sort of like external romantic gestures, and I think it took some time for me to get away from that because I know personally if I were to get flowers like or like get all these things, I'd be like, oh, that's cute, but it's like not really how I communicate or how I display love, which is like acts of service, which I feel like a lot of Asian people is just acts of service and like bringing in fruit and stuff like that. So it like took some time for me to unlearn these sort of external standards and create my own.
You mentioned briefly about marriage. Where do you kind of see yourself in the future? Do you see yourself getting married? And like, if so, what influences that decision?
I teeter back and forth on this all the time because part of me just wants to like live with my best friends in a huge mega mansion. We just all like take care of our own children and yeah. But I think so. I don't know, because when I think of marriage, I think of literally lifelong commitment, and I am really terrified that I'll make a huge mistake and I'll be like stuck with someone that is like not compatible with me, or like we like missed a huge chunk of whatever when we were dating and therefore like made some mistake. And I think that's because like divorce is like a huge taboo in my culture and like where I'm from and things like that. It's just like you either stick it out and you work through it, or you continue to hate the person you marry. And I was talking to my friend about this, who's not Chinese, and like doesn't come from this kind of family background, and she was like, yeah, if it doesn't work out, you just get a divorce. And I'm like, it's not that simple. And she's like, no, but like that's what you do. And I'm like, but I don't want to. I'm a senior right now, and I'm currently in a relationship, and he doesn't go to MIT. And so like, throughout college, I didn't really get to date as many people as I'd liked, because it just never really, like, not that I didn't want someone, I just kind of thought of it like, oh, I'll have time to do it later, but no one really has time to do it later if you don't make it a priority, which is something that I didn't really do. The person I'm dating right now, we met through a dating app, and I think at first, I think we're really different people, and because of that, I found it really interesting to like hear about his life. Their concern mostly was that like he grew up in a pretty different like family background than I was, and they were scared that because of that he wouldn't be as like committed or as loving towards me, and it hasn't really manifested in that way at all as of now. So like, I don't know, I think Asian, at least my parents, they're like people who don't like keep things like kind of hidden and don't really communicate, and talk about when things like bother them and like how they can go on to like solve the problems that they're bothering. And so like I kind of grew up with that, and it was really frustrating like being around all of their like bickering arguments and things like that. Not that they don't love each other, but like, like they always have like these like mini conflicts. And so like what the person I'm currently dating, he does a really good job like making me talk about the things that bother me and like resolving that right then and there. And I think that's like such a refreshing perspective and practice that I'm not used to, that like I find really nice and comforting about this relationship. So yeah.